Welcome to Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. We've got two wild, amazing, incredible hours for you. But Caroline, we start this show with speaking of wild, speaking of amazing, speaking of incredible. Last night, one of the best stories in the history of sports had the perfect storybook ending. Indiana takes down Miami in a game that was epic, that came all the way down to the closing seconds, a game that gave us everything we could possibly ask for and more. And somehow, some way, just when you thought the legend of Indiana and Curt Cignetti couldn't grow anymore, it did.
And we got that moment that I think will live in the lore of college football playoff history forever. The Heisman Trophy winner has yet another Heisman moment and in a national championship effort nonetheless. You know, Fitz, I am such a sucker for the story of the American dream. You know, the idea that it doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, how much money you have, what your parents did, that you can do anything. You have the opportunity to build any sort of life for yourself that you might want. I love that kind of story archetype. Curt Cignetti has achieved the ultimate college football American dream in winning the national championship with Indiana. I mean, this is the first-time national champion that we've ever had in my lifetime, because we're living in a sport with dynasties. We're living in a sport with the haves and the have-nots. So we've gone through decades and decades of the Ohio States and the Clemsons and the Alabamas and the LSUs that are winning national championships. The sport is not built for the small man. The sport doesn't have parity. That's what I think makes this turnaround even more impressive. College football is not built for everyone. It's not like you can't compare this Indiana turnaround, or not even a turnaround because they didn't come from anything. This Indiana resurrection, I think is the right word. You can't compare it to anything that we see in professional sports, because professional sports are constructed for everyone to get a crack at the apple. Professional sports have salary caps. Professional sports have collective bargaining agreements. Professional sports have drafts where the worst teams get the best picks and everyone gets an opportunity to be good. College football does not have parity, never has, and never will have true parity in this sport. And Curt Cignetti built not just a national champion, but a wagon of a team. And he did it not by spending the most money. He didn't spend tens of millions of Mark Cuban's dollars on this team. Indiana wasn't even top 20 in NIL spending this year. Indiana, yeah, sure, they got a bunch of players out of the transfer portal. Kind of the modern way of building a juggernaut is with money and through the transfer portal. But what Curt Cignetti did was get players from JMU out of the transfer portal, like D'Angelo Pons, friend of the show. He had a pick six in the very first play in the Peach Bowl against Oregon. D'Angelo Pons was a massive part of that secondary. Fernando Mendoza, he was originally committed to Yale before, changing course and going to Cal. And Fernando Mendoza ended up being the Heisman Trophy winner and ultimately had the game-winning touchdown in the national championship game. You think about Pat Coogan, their center. Sure, he transferred from Notre Dame, but the only reason why he got an opportunity at Notre Dame was because they had injuries. And once players came back healthy, Pat Coogan didn't have a spot on that Notre Dame team anymore. And he ended up being the offensive player of the game in the Rose Bowl, a center. So what Curt Cignetti did was not take the modern formula for competing in college football. What he did was make this roster with with construction paper and glue and duct tape. Find a bunch of 2-stars and 3-stars, not a single 5-star on that roster. And he developed them. He found the perfect players for his type of system. He had his coaching staff from James Madison with him at Indiana, and they now have won a national championship. It is the most improbable story that I think I have ever seen in college football, that Curt Cignetti built a wagon in an era of college sports that's not built for Indiana. And he did it at Indiana. It is just such a remarkable story. I think we may have lost Fitz's audio.
All right, there we go. Turns out I was muted. My bad. My fault. Look, some of the haters have come out in the last 24 hours. That's what social media does. Let's just acknowledge here, though, that everything you just said is so important, because I want to remind every single fan base, Curt Cignetti and his coaching staff didn't do anything that your favorite team couldn't have done. Curt Cignetti didn't go out and get people that your favorite team couldn't have gotten. Curt Cignetti didn't go out and outpay everybody to bring in people that your favorite team simply never would have had access to. Curt Cignetti didn't go out and do something that Alabama isn't capable of doing. He didn't do something that any other Big Ten school couldn't have done. They didn't have some magic potion in a bottle that gave them a national championship. They just, as a team and as a program, did it better. And that's why I think it's just going to have to sit in some people's cross for a second here as you realize that Indiana has built this entire thing by simply doing it better. As a team, they just came together so much. And then the gutsy play of Mendoza. Look, we're all going to talk about that last touchdown, that 4th and 5 touchdown run. That where, in full transparency, I was sitting in a bar surrounded by people and I screamed, "That's my quarterback." I'm not an Indiana fan, but I certainly hope that that's my favorite team's quarterback next year. That moment right there is going to be remembered in college football forever. And it should be. And this team is going to be remembered forever. And they should be. And they're remembered not just for the fact that they went 16-0, not just for that fact that they won a national championship, but it gives hope to every other school in this college football landscape right now. It gives hope to every fan base that sits back and says, well, why not us? It gives hope to every single team. For all of the people that thought college football would be broken through playoff college expansion, they thought it'd be broken through NIL, that this is just going to screw it up. Remember 2 years ago when all I heard were the so-called experts sitting on TV telling me that this was only going to create more of the haves and the have-nots? It didn't. Indiana went out and they won a national championship. And in the process, they outdid everybody else. They outdeveloped. They outcoached. They out-scouted talent. I sat there and watched Bill Belichick on a podium on game day before the game talking about the fact that they just didn't really have the right chance to get guys in that they needed to get in, and they're starting to build something. Okay, guess what? Every Belichick excuse for why North Carolina hasn't been able to win is absolutely shown to be fraudulent by Curt Cignetti, because he went to Indiana and he maybe didn't have the biggest names in the world, but they knew how to develop, identify, find, bring in, and accomplish with the talent that they had available to them. Shame on everybody else that finds excuses, because Curt Cignetti in Indiana just took all of those excuses, balled them up, and won a national championship.
And he's broken the mold while doing it, and also broke our brains while doing it. Because we all in this era of college football, really in sports in general, we're always looking for a formula. We are all searching for that secret magic sauce that equals a championship contender or equals a championship at the end of the day. It's a copycat sport. Okay, what did Ohio State do last year to win a national championship? Let's try and do that. What did Nick Saban do at Alabama for all of those years to go on that dynastic run? Let's try and replicate that. What Curt Cignetti has done at Indiana, I do not think is replicable. I think that every team across America is going to be searching for and chasing for what Curt Cignetti has built at Indiana. And let me just state for the record how crazy that statement sounds. Every coach in America is chasing what Indiana is doing. Welcome to college football in 2025 and 2026. But I don't think that what Curt Cignetti has done is something that you can just copy and paste, something that you can just replicate, something that, any other team across America can say, okay, we'll follow those guidelines, we'll follow those parameters and try and recreate that formula. Because I don't think that you can. Because I think what that secret sauce is that man right there that had the crazy enough conviction that you could do this at Indiana. And maybe even deep down, Curt Cignetti didn't actually believe that he could do this. He made everyone believe that he could do this. Because when he was hired at Indiana, he said, "Google me, I win." And he said, "Purdue sucks." And everyone said, "Yeah, Purdue sucks." And then he says, "Ohio State and Michigan suck too." And everyone was like, "Whoa, pump the brakes there, Curt. Let's understand where we are in the hierarchy of college football." But he didn't care where Indiana belonged in the hierarchy of college football, because where they were in 2023, he believed was going to be a far cry from where they would end up being. I don't even really know if he deep down believed that Indiana would be where they are in 2025. But he believed that it was possible. He believed that he could do it at a place where it had never been done before. And what Curt Cignetti has done is instilled that belief in every single program across America. And I think it's probably scared a lot of the big programs across America. I think it's probably scared a lot of the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Michigans and the traditional powers that exist in college football. Because now there's a belief at Northwestern, at Arizona State, at Vanderbilt, at any of these never been there before, have not kind of programs across college football. We can do this. We can do this. If Indiana can do it, which was the losingest program in FBS history when Curt Cignetti took the job. It had lost more games than any other program across FBS college football. They just won a national championship in his second year. They have lost 2 games in the last 2 years, and it was to Ohio State and Notre Dame in his first season. That every single program across America should be equally as terrified of what Curt Cignetti has done and also as motivated by what Curt Cignetti has done. He has changed the blueprint of how you can win a championship in college football.
And just when you thought I couldn't fall any more in love with Fernando Mendoza, I did. Look, it wasn't 3/4 of
That's your
beautiful
guy,
football.
Fitz.
It is. I'm all in. I'm completely fangirling everything about Fernando Mendoza at this point. He
As
is
you
my boy
should.
band. Look, to me, this was such an important game for him because he got knocked the you-know-what out over and over and over again. And you know what? I never felt like he was seeing ghosts. I didn't feel like all of a sudden he was getting happy feet. I didn't feel like he was running just to run. I didn't feel like the pressure that was getting to him was actually getting to him. Even though Miami hit him over and over and over, and kudos to Holly Rowe for making sure he showed everybody his arm after the game. That was a violent visual to see. But you think about what all of that meant to that young man when it's 4th and 5. He's got the first down. He could go down, and he doesn't. He spins around, and he dives over the world to get that touchdown. There was a want to, a desire, and a willingness for somebody that busted his lip in the opening quarter. There was just a willingness for Fernando Mendoza. Every time he got hit, it was like he stood right back up and said, "That all you got? Hit me again." We've talked a lot about the fact that, frankly, in his post-game press conferences, he comes across like a little bit of a goober. I get that he's a little bit of a goober. I don't care because he doesn't play like one. He plays like somebody that's out there not afraid for contact. And in the game's biggest moments, when he needed those back shoulder throws, when he needed to make plays, man, Fernando Mendoza put this team on his back. I couldn't be more impressed with what we've seen starting from the Big Ten championship, ending in a national championship for that man. He deserves the Heisman. He deserves the praise. He deserves, in my mind, squarely to be the first overall pick in the NFL draft.
He's so precious. He is truly just such a sweet and precious little thing. And it is kind of crazy if you listen to him in interviews and press conferences. He's so humble, and there is such a level of authenticity that comes across whenever he speaks because he truly, in his soul and his heart of hearts, just loves football, appreciates his coaches, and appreciates his teammates. That's another part of all of this. It's not just what he does on the field. Is I think he's going to just absolutely blow general managers away in all of his combine interviews and all of his everything that he does, all of his media availabilities throughout this entire NFL draft process. But it's like a switch flips whenever he puts that helmet on and he goes out on the field because he's a dog. Like, do not let his interviews and his sweet, kind demeanor fool you because you mentioned the bloody lip. I mean, his entire chin strap was red and bloody. It was what, 6, 7, 8 minutes into the game. That Miami pass rush, that Miami defensive front was swarming Fernando Mendoza really for the entirety of the game. And even in that touchdown there, that moment that will live forever in Indiana football history and football history as a whole. Like, Fernando Mendoza was like a pinball popping between some of those Miami defenders, and he just continued to stay up and continued to make plays. So yeah, Fernando Mendoza, dog, and also such a precious, sweet little angel. I do want to give Miami credit though. I thought Indiana was going to absolutely positively roll in this game because I just think Indiana and thought Indiana was that perfect of a team. Every single time it felt like Indiana was putting Miami away, Miami had an answer. So credit to Miami for that. But Miami just made far too many mistakes against a team that doesn't make them. Indiana had the block punt for a touchdown. Miami had the block punt Indiana had the block punt for a touchdown. Miami had too many of just like silly penalties and critical penalties and terrible moments that extended drives for Indiana. And that's all it takes is a couple of mistakes here and there. And that ultimately is the difference. The missed field goal as well. How many times in that game last night did we think, man, that field goal will be nice to have right now? So you just can't make those mistakes against a truly flawless team and expect to win a game, especially a game of this magnitude.
Both teams show tremendous resilience. Congratulations for Indiana for completing the story. Much more to come over the course of the next couple hours on what we saw from Indiana. But coming up, what are we going to see from these two teams? We get the third portion of the trilogy of these games. The question is, when you look at the tape, who's actually better? We'll answer it.
At the very top of my list, we need finality to Aspinall versus Gunn.
Yeah.
We need finality to this.
Have to.
I just want to see this fight play out because guess what? It was a very entertaining fight and it was playing out in a way that I think a lot of people didn't think it would play out. So I need to see that fight. I have to see that fight. The division needs to see that fight. They both need to see that fight. They both earned it and deserved it, and we can't move on without that fight.
Do the Spurs still take Dylan Harper over Con Knippel and DJ Edgecombe?
I think for me, if I was to do it all over again, I would still take the best pick available, and that is Dylan Harper. I mean, you see, he just is such an elite creator.
Prior to the draft, Mo, I was pretty consistent in saying that I would trade down and take a Con Knippel. Con at 4, I still think would have been the best possible outcome for San Antonio, and I feel that way even more strongly at this point.
All football teams are dams. Some of them have a ton of cracks. Some of them have a few cracks. It's all about who faces enough water pressure from their schedule to expose the cracks. Most of the time when you're playing in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're going to face several tests that will expose your cracks. I don't think Ohio State did this year. They faced Texas early in the year, and they just never faced enough pressure to expose the cracks.
Did you notice that the scoring totals had fallen in the new year, that the New Year's resolution apparently was to bring physicality back?
A couple of years ago when it was all of a sudden everybody scored 50, 60, 70. And then like the air went out of the ball for a month. And it was like in the middle of the season, the way the rules were being called kind of changed and scoring started to drop.
Look, to be fair, Dan, it could be, hey, everyone just magically figured out how to play legal defense.
This is a wild stat Field Yates put out there. The Rams and Seahawks split their season series. We know that. But also, points scored in those games. 58 for the Rams, 57 for the Seahawks. Total yards in those two games, 830 for the Rams, 829 for the Seahawks. Now they meet again with the trip to the Super Bowl on the line. We'll get into some of the tape. We're going to figure out who's better in some important categories. But Caroline, this is a reminder of how evenly matched these teams have been for two games. Like it is. We say this all the time. Kind of a shame this isn't the Super Bowl just because one of these teams isn't going to get a shot. Like this game is just down to the wire for me.
And that is the reason why what Field just showed there, which is a crazy staggering stat. But that's why I don't mind that we're getting this game for a third time. That's why I'm actually very glad we get this game for a third time. There are several matchups that exist in the NFL that I'm like, I don't need to see this game twice. I don't need to see this game, much less a third time. But give me Rams, Seahawks 4, 5, 6, 7. Give it to me for a full 17-game season. Because I think if these two teams played 20 times, their record's probably 10-10. And I am here for that, especially when the stakes are this high. A trip to the Super Bowl on the line.
So let's get into a tale of the tape. This is where we're going to take some key categories and we're going to figure out who has the edge when we go one by one through these categories. Let's start, Caroline, with the head coach. So tale of the tape here, we've got McVay versus McDonald. Who do you give the edge to in this one?
I give McVay the coaching edge here, but it is incredibly close. I have been on record saying that Mike McDonald is the Sean McVay of the defensive side of the ball. So I feel like their acumen, their expertise in their respective sides of the ball, pretty much a wash there. But McVay gets the edge for experience. McVay's coached in these games before. McVay's been there before. He's coached in games of this caliber. Mike Macdonald as a head coach just doesn't have that same level of experience, and having that tactical experience, I think, is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's where it comes back to the old Ric Flairism. If you're into wrestling, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. All right. So while I agree that McVay, we agree, McVay has the edge. We're going to see that a lot differently depending on the outcome of this game. Like this is one of those just, moments where there are career defining, there are legacy defining, there are perception defining games. This one, Seattle at home against the Rams. If Mike Macdonald works out a scheme here that really sort of thwarts what the Rams are capable of, we're going to have to take that man much more seriously in the conversation about best coaches in the NFL. And I feel like, honestly, this is just because everybody hates defense. If he was as renowned as an offensive coach, we'd already be calling him one of the best. But because he's renowned as a defensive coach, we're like, defense wins championships, but offense wins video games. So, I think that's holding him back. What about quarterback? Who do you give the edge in this one? I laugh as I say it. I think we both know the answer and who has it, but maybe you'll shock me. Who do you give the edge to, tail of the tape, and the quarterbacks?
Stafford. The Rams get the quarterback edge here. I mean, Stafford is probably going to be MVP, might be MVP, is an MVP caliber contender, and also has been here before. When Sam Darnold has been here before, he's kind of pooped in his pants a little bit. Now, this is an opportunity for Sam Darnold to kind of shake that reputation, but for now, it's Matthew Stafford.
Oh, yeah, it's Matthew Stafford in a landslide. And look, it's the quarterback
that
really makes me the least comfortable about picking the Seahawks in this game because, to your point, Sam Darnold has a Rams problem. We all know this. Like, we've talked about this. And I remember early in the season, the first time they played, one of the big takeaways was, man, maybe he just struggles against the Rams. It's a bad time to figure out if that's the truth. So, yeah, I think there's a little element of an opportunity to change that for Sam Darnold. And I'm sure Vikings fans are going to watch this through and through and say, oh, this is the moment he melts down. What if he doesn't? That could be the delight here. How about playmaker edge? Who do you give the edge? And we'll go wide receivers, running backs, tight end all together. Who do you give the edge to? I want to point out for anyone that hasn't seen big news here as Charbonnet is out for the season with the torn ACL that was suffered in the last game. So we've had a two-headed running back monster for the Seahawks. We now have a one-headed running back. So who do you give the edge to?
Honestly, and this probably isn't allowed, this is a wash for me. I don't think either side has an overwhelming edge here because I do think that Jackson Smith-Njigba belongs in that same category of the Justin Jeffersons, the Jamar Chases, the CeeDee Lambs of the NFL. But also there's a little man named Puka Nacua on the other sideline who plays up to that level as well. So Puka Nacua as one of the top receivers in the league as well. You bring up Zach Charbonnet and his ACL tear that definitely is going to be a hit to this Seahawks run game and also passing game as well, the way that they want to use him in the passing game. But, I see Kyron Williams on one side, Blake Corum on one side, Kenneth Walker on the other. The way that the Rams utilize tight ends, it's so fascinating to see kind of Sean McVay cook with the tight ends. The Rams use 13 personnel, 1 running back, 3 tight ends, more than any other team in the National Football League. So it's not just the pieces that the Rams have, but it's also the offensive mastermind that they have to kind of cook with those pieces. But also you have Kenneth Walker and JSN on the other side. So I don't mean for this to be a cop-out. It's genuinely what I believe. I think these skill position players and the tools that both of these quarterbacks have around them, it's a wash.
That is such a well laid out, smart, well said, and incorrect take all at once. Because we're not allowed to have ties. There are no ties. Look,
it's allowed when it's true.
I guess. I mean, yes, you're probably right. There's a reason the show's not called First Nuanced Discussion. It's called First Take. So got to have a take here. I'm going to give you a take, all right? I'm gonna go all in, and I may totally regret this, but I've been living in that spot where, like, me and JSN, I've been ready to buy a ring for a minute. Like, I feel like I'm falling in love with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I feel like we keep saying, yeah, but like we want to call him the best wide receiver in the NFL, but then we say, yeah, but he's not quite to the level of, and I mean no disrespect to Puka, who I think is a top 3-4 wide receiver in the NFL. So I genuinely mean no disrespect. I think right now Puka Nacua is going to be the best receiver on this field in this game. So I give the best receiver in this game to Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think I said that right. Jackson Smith and Jigba going to be the best receiver in this game. So now it comes down to Kenneth Walker. And I've spent years watching Kenneth Walker save coaches jobs in college. Mel Tucker, you should send him flowers every year for what he did at Michigan State. I think Kenneth Walker has been far more capable
I don't know
of
if he
taking
should.
Well, I mean, everything that Mel Tucker did afterwards, we're not talking about. But getting him $100 million, that's Kenneth Walker the third. Kenneth Walker the third, to me, is so much more capable than being half of a backfield. If they had lost Walker and had Charbonnet, I would have gone advantage Rams. I think Kenneth Walker is actually more important to this complete game plan than Zach Charbonnet would have been. I think Walker's somebody they're going to be able to lean on, and he will have a huge game here. So I think because I give the best wide receiver on the field to Seattle and the best running back on the field to Seattle, I give the advantage to the Seahawks. I'm out here with the takes. All right, so what about the defense? Which side has the better defense, Caroline?
Oh, it's Seattle. It's Seattle. Don't need to hesitate. I mean, Seattle has one of the best defenses in the NFL. If you watched what Seattle did to the 49ers in the divisional round of the playoffs, and you thought, I don't know, I still have some questions marks about this defense. That's on you. This defense is terrifying. This defense has now held the 49ers touchdownless in their last 2 meetings. And we're talking about Kyle Shanahan here. We're talking about a guy that doesn't get shut out of the end zone. So it's, as good as this Rams defense is, as intimidating as that pass rush can be, Jared Verse, Omar Speights, the list goes on, it's the Seahawks.
Now, here's the thing. I love my Chopped analogy. I want great coaches to walk in like the TV show Chopped, open the basket of ingredients and see what they're cooking with.
Yeah.
I believe that the Rams' basket of ingredients is actually better than the Seahawks, but I think the chef in charge of that basket is so much better. I believe so much in Mike McDonald that I believe that because he is the one cooking the ingredients, the advantage goes to Seattle. So even though I think particularly that defensive line for the Rams is absolutely unstoppable, I am look at that. In his last 3 playoff games, his defensive coordinator and head coach, his teams have allowed a combined 0 points in the second half. He is on a different level, and because of that, the advantage goes there. All right, so who wins the game, Caroline? We have been squarely. So if you've been watching all year, we've had the Hatfield and McCoys. That's a very dated dueling reference here. Caroline's been Team Rams. I've been Team Seattle. Let's see what happens when it's all said and done. We've looked at the tape. Who you got?
I do feel like a Rams hipster. Like I was on this team before they were cool. So I'm gonna ride with the guys who got me here. I'm taking the Rams. I think experience is so important. I will always believe that you have to knock on the door before or be there before in order to get through. This Rams team has. Matthew Stafford has seen and played a lot of football. Sean McVay has coached a lot of football. I think that experience wins out, especially with my question marks about Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I had a friend of mine tell me the other day that I need to wear a Seahawks hoodie because I've talked about this team so much, which we know I'm never going to do. I'm not changing now. Come on, Indiana just told us last night that this is the season of Disney movies, and all of these things have to have happy storybook endings. It will have a happy storybook ending on the way to the Super Bowl. We see redemption for Sam Darnold. We see the moment for the Seahawks. Kenneth Walker with a big game. I like it. I'm still taking Seattle. So we broke it on the tape, and neither of us have changed our minds. All right, we'll keep breaking down all of the action coming day for Bills fans. Jon Feliciano going to join us next. He knows that team better than anybody. We'll get his thoughts on what in the heck is going on in Buffalo.
One school that's doing some work in there right now, very quietly, is the Florida Gators. At the time of us taping this, Florida is sitting there with a top 10 class. When you're like, JD, wait a second. Florida's got a top 10 class? Who have they added? And I think this portal class in general for John Summerall is a good reflection of just the overall vibe, attitude, persona of what you're going to get from John Summerall during his time in Gainesville.
And I've been thinking about the Denver Nuggets here for a little bit. Jamal Murray's gonna have to carry the torch during this program. Like I know it's the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air looking around and no furniture around, but hey, he's gonna have to figure it out. What I will say that helps Denver is the return of this version of Aaron Gordon. And I very specifically mean this version of Aaron Gordon. And I know you might have a twinge of concern that he may do too much, but it was good early and they need it now.
Have you had a chance to kind of unpack all of it?
Yeah, I don't know that I have yet. I think it's just another reminder of how wild pro football can be. I've lived it so many times. I mean, I think going back a little over 2 years ago when I tore my Achilles to now, there's been a lot of curveballs and a lot of change. And I was told a long time ago in pro football, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I'm reminded of that time and again.
How long do you feel like that window is with Lamar, though?
I think you can get 2 more years of Lamar as a locked-in top 5 guy. And then I think after that is when it's like, okay, maybe he ages to more being a top 12 guy, which is still good. Maybe more of a tier 2 guy in my brain. And then it kind of ages from there. Russ went from like a tier 2 guy that fell off to a tier 3, tier 4 guy. You're going to have that drop off at some point in your career.
Yesterday, as we were on air, this broke. The Bills firing head coach Sean McDermott after their loss in the divisional round to the Broncos. McDermott had a 98-50 record over 9 seasons with the Bills. We covered it yesterday as the news broke, and we'll continue to cover it now with somebody that can help us break this down from the inside. We welcome Jon Feliciano, 10-year NFL vet, spent 3 years with McDermott in Buffalo. I really appreciate. What was your initial reaction yesterday? Because a lot of us sat here sort of shocked as it went down. As someone that knows that organization, how did you react?
Yeah, man, I was shocked too. I get it at the same time. But Sean is so well respected and liked in that building. It was never going to be a clean break where everyone's happy with it. I mean, that organization really has a lot to thank with Sean and what he's done and changed the culture there. I think I got there his 2nd or 3rd season. That was his 3rd season. And I'm gonna be honest, when I went to Buffalo, at that time, Buffalo wasn't a destination. And my ties there was Bobby Johnson. I spent time with him in Oakland, and Buffalo wasn't like, hey, let's go to Buffalo. But obviously, when I got there, I fell in love with the place, and now people are going to Buffalo because they want to go win, and that is a credit to Sean.
For how long do you think the Bills organization had their minds made up? Like, was it from the jump they thought, okay, if we fall short of a Super Bowl, then we're going to have to move on from Sean McDermott? Or do you think this was a post-mortem decision?
I think it's probably the first one. He's been there for so long, and there's some crazy stat. Like if head coach and the quarterback doesn't win in the first 5 years, they're not going to win. And you take into account, I think, was Josh going into his 9th season. I guess it's time for a change. Sean did a great job as their coach. They were always really good, the last 6-7 years, whatever it's been. It's just they didn't get it done in the playoffs. There's multiple times where we think we got the game won, and then just it ended up not playing out that way towards the end. There's eventually Sean's going to get the blame. We've been through the coordinators, we've been through the coaches, the other position coaches. Now, unfortunately, they didn't get it done, and Sean had to get cut.
All right, but in the process of Sean getting cut, Bean gets promoted to the executive. Like, he's running the whole thing at this point. Well, how did that sit with you as a former player watching, the GM get promoted while the coach gets fired?
No, I mean, I love Bean. I can see eventually Bean moving just up to that. What was his new official title now?
President of Football
President
Operations.
of Football Operations.
He's the president of Football Ops.
Yeah, so he'll
Whatever that
probably
means.
yeah. So I could see him being moved to just that position eventually. But right now, with all this moving parts, I think they want to keep some stuff static. I think Bean has done a great job. I know he gets a lot of flack for not having a number one receiver or whatever, but I mean, you look at KC. Who is KC's number one receiver has been in their Super Bowl runs? And they have good guys, but I don't think anyone over there can be considered a number one, like top tier guy, like when we had Diggs or Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, like those kind of guys. I don't think that's necessary to win. And I think you can tell with the Bills, it hasn't been that case. I mean, at least in the regular season.
I always believe that in football, it's never just one person's fault. It's usually like a blame pie, and you can divvy up certain slices to whoever deserves the blame. In your opinion, when you look at the Bills season, who gets the biggest slice of blame pie for falling short of the Super Bowl?
And I think this year it really, I think it's hard for the guys to understand Sean getting fired this year, especially with all the stuff that's gone down with injuries and things of that nature. I don't know. I think it just falls on Sean, because I don't think you can necessarily say, oh, it's the offense or it's the defense this year. I think it just was the culmination of everything.
All right, so much was made yesterday about once he was fired, about Davis Webb, a hot name everybody seems to be falling in love with. There's also right. All right, so give me what's the world need to know about Davis Webb?
That only now, for as long as I known Davis, I've never called him Davis. It's so weird for me to call him Davis. But man, yeah, that's Dragon, man. Dragon is a hell of a coach. He was doing things like he was the definition of a player coach. Especially, I mean, you go back to my time with him in the Giants, our 1 year there together. He was doing advanced scouting for the team that we would play the following week. So for many years, when he was in the Giants before, or even the Jets, but for sure when he was on Buffalo, his first few years, he was all about doing, the coaches' jobs. I mean, he was, doing all the advanced scouting, breaking down film. So Davis is, like my tweet says right there, I think we have an opportunity in Buffalo to do what the Rams did with Sean McVay, hiring Sean when he was 30. I think Davis is going to be one of the best coaches in the league in the next decade. And I mean, I think I'm not the only one. I mean, he's getting a second interview with the Raiders. He's getting another interview with the Ravens. So like, he is becoming a hot commodity. SALEH obviously just got the Titans job in Nashville, so he's out of there. So my two picks are still, I think locking in Dragon now while he's still a young coach, and being able to grow with him and have a coach for the next decade or so. And obviously I'm rooting for Daboll, just being a Buffalo guy. What a full circle moment that would be. And the fans, I mean, him and the fans it would just be a love fest.
Okay, let's not bury the lead here. Why is Davis Webb Dragon?
I don't know. I got introduced to him as Dragon, and you just follow along.
Fair enough.
That is a very, very good question. I wish I had the answer, but it was just one of those things. Hey, this is Dragon. All right. And it's like, what a name. Right. It rolls off the tongue. It's just like, man, I wish that was my nickname.
Like that's real, John. Like that's the real
That's
tip here.
awesome.
Like if your nickname's Dragon, then you go by Dragon. Like that's just such a
Exactly.
badass nickname.
You don't
there's
question
there's
it.
so
No.
but let me ask you, like he's 30, right? So
Yep.
from a coaching standpoint, how weird is it for guys in a locker room when if somebody that young, we've got a couple of young guys that are finalists for jobs at this point. Is it weird for you, thinking from a player standpoint, to have a 30-year-old head coach?
Not for me. I mean, I think I was around for a pretty long time. My last 2 years, I was older than some of the coaches. So you honestly don't think about it. I mean, when they were the coaches were offensive line assistants. So I gave them some flack at sometimes, just having fun. Besides that, though, you don't really. I was always like, hey, respect your elders if they ever told me anything. But that's all good fun. But it don't really matter, especially with Dragon. Like, he's such a smart person. I think he was part of the reason why Daniel Jones was having such a great year when we were there, my first year with the Giants. And you see what he's done with Bo Nix. I think he's just an offensive genius. He's kind of like the next coming of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. That's a great picture right there. Josh looks so disinterested with Dragon right next to him.
He also looks like a baby. Looks
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a newborn child in that photo. And I know we're talking about kind of this next era of the Buffalo Bills, but I do know that some Bills fans are still kind of licking their wounds and still mourning the season that was this past year. If you could give a message to Bills fans everywhere that are feeling down right now after yet another heartbreaking playoff loss, what would you tell them?
I think the future is bright. Let's get Dragon in there and go win a championship. It sucks. I think this year they had a really good chance, obviously with Mahomes and all those guys being out. But we've been through dark days before in Buffalo, and if there's a fan base that can lick their wounds and get back on the saddle for next year, it's the Buffalo Bills and Bills Mafia. It's also, you're gonna be able to start fresh. You're gonna be in the new stadium with the new head coach. So there's a lot of new breath and new air coming in. So I think and you have Josh Allen, so we're gonna be all right.
I mean, you mentioned Mahomes. Eric Bieniemy, according to reports, about to be reunited with Mahomes. How scared should that have Bills fans and the rest of the AFC?
It'll be all right. I think it's really Andy Reid. I mean, I respect Eric Bieniemy. Whatever, I can't say his last name. Sorry, EB. That's what everyone calls it. I respect him, but I don't think it'd be that big of a deal.
I know that you did play at Miami, and we are fresh off of a national championship loss. I'm sorry to put salt in the wound. It was an epic scene at Hard Rock last night. Allow us to be your therapy. How are we feeling?
It's been a real terrible week for football for me. This weekend has been real rough. Saturday sucked. Watched the Bills and the Niners lose. And this was the only saving grace I had in my back pocket that, well, maybe Miami will get it done for the boys. I mean, what a great game. I don't think a lot of people were giving us a chance, and it was right there for us to take it and win. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. And I'm going to be wearing all black for the next few days and just mourn what the football gods have given me this year.
God, I wish I could reach through the camera and
So
just give you a big old hug. You guys can check out the
Yeah.
Not Our Fault podcast. John's the co-host of that. Follow him on Twitter at Mongo Feliciano. We a big Blazing Saddles fan? Is that why we're Mongo Feliciano?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't, but my high school coach was, and then it stuck with me from high school and college. And then I think when you become a pro, I don't think Mongo is the right nickname for me, so I kind of let that go. But it is still my Twitter handle.
That's amazing, man. John, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out with us so much. Thanks for letting us help you work through all the therapy. And
My trauma,
now
yeah,
you've
thank
only
you.
made me
We're here for you.
Look, you've
thank
spoken
you guys.
Dragon into existence, but I'm going to need him as the Raiders coach. Thanks, John. Appreciate your time, man. Appreciate you hanging out with us.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, John.
Coming up next,
Thank
huge news in the NBA. Jimmy Butler out for the season. We'll tell you what it means next.
Penn State has imported Iowa State. It's the best way I could explain it. Penn State has now taken Rocco Beck. They took RB1. They took wide receiver 1. They took 3 offensive linemen. I detest that this is how college football works at the moment, but it's the way it works at the moment. And that is when you take a head coach, part of the thinking behind hiring the head coach is who he can bring with him. And in Matt Campbell's case, it was basically whoever he wants.
I'm very fascinated to see which direction they go here, because I think that Roman, this is the deal with him. He's not terrible. He's not offensive as an offensive coordinator, but he can get you to a certain point. You need somebody else to get you to the next point. I think he's done a good job with Herbert, getting him to run more and getting him to push the ball down the field. Now I'd like to see, someone kind of just, again, give him some more quicker options. That's the type of stuff I'd like to see from the next coach.
Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gahn, that needs to be resolved, right? Hamzat Shemaiah versus Sean Strickland. But I will accept Hamzat Shemaiah versus Fluffy Hernandez. If Fluffy beats Sean Strickland, I'll take either of those. Here's another one of my, but you accept these as secondary.
100%.
Armin Sarukian versus UFC lightweight champion. We cannot just keep having Armin doing grappling matches and eating and all this stuff. He
I'm
must
kind of okay
fight
with
for
it.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I know you love it.
You get the first pick in the underrated player draft. Who are you taking?
Jalen Duren has never made an All-Star game. He's never made an All-NBA team. He's gotten so much better as a scorer this year. Jalen Duren is like a legit All-Star this year. And so because everybody talks about the Detroit situation like it's trash and Cade Cunningham, I'm going to say he's still a little bit underrated, and he's my number 1 pick.
Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. Breaking news, Golden State Warriors star Jimmy Butler has suffered a season-ending torn right ACL. This is a stunning and staggering injury for somebody that has meant so much to this team this year, for somebody that is, frankly, a huge part of why Golden State is competitive when they're competitive. Caroline, this has to have the Warriors organizationally right now shook, because it puts him in a very difficult. I want to remind everybody, it's not that long ago Steve Kerr sat at a podium and told all of us this team is not built to compete with the OKCs of the world. And now, if that was the case before last night, I can't even imagine what the honest assessment is of where this roster is now, knowing that they won't have Jimmy Butler for the rest of the year.
This changes everything. I think it should change everything for the way the Warriors evaluate their team, for the way that the Warriors project the rest of their season. Because if Steve Kerr is saying, hey, look, we're not constructed to compete with the Spurs and the Thunder of the West, that was with Jimmy Butler. Now you don't have Jimmy Butler. Now what? We were talking so much about what the Warriors were going to do at the trade deadline. Would Jonathan Kuminga get moved? Well, at this point, now, don't you kind of need Jonathan Kuminga? And at this point, if you don't have Jimmy Butler, if you weren't constructed to compete with Jimmy Butler, now you don't have Jimmy Butler, now you're definitely not constructed to compete. At this point, if you're the Warriors, do you kind of step back and say, if we're not able to compete the rest of this season, do we not just lightly sell? Do we just full sell? If we can't compete right now, and we've already portrayed that message to our fan base, how can we then step back and sell to our fan base just a couple of small tweaks here and there when you don't have Jimmy Butler for the rest of the season? I think that this could possibly and probably should completely shift the Warriors' approach to the trade deadline.
I don't disagree. Look, number one, put a fork in Golden State this year. They're done. They were already done, but now they were already done. if you believe in, things like plus minus point differential as an important stat, for example, there's been no player more important to Golden State this year. The highest plus differential is Jimmy Butler when he is on the floor, higher than everybody else we talk about on that roster. So I say that to say that Golden State without him is going to be a shell of Golden State. I think two things can be true here, though. I do want to remind, and Tom Haberstroh is going to join us next hour with some thoughts on what they should do. I just believe in my heart of hearts that smart, well-run, stable organizations in sports more often than not don't react emotionally. They don't react quickly just to react. They do things with a very calculated approach. I don't think that the Golden State Warriors will be able to do anything before the trade deadline that's less than 2 weeks away that can be calculated, that can make the most sense long term. I'm not sure they can even salvage a relationship with Jonathan Kuminga if they wanted to. He's made it clear he doesn't even want to be there. So I think the hardest part of this realization for Golden State fans is that you're screwed this year. I don't think that there's anything that can or should happen this year that's going to be able to fix this issue. I just think that now Golden State's going to have to take a step back. They're going to have to use the rest of the season to start planning and plotting how they're going to build moving forward. And then they're going to have to make aggressive decisions about what the future of their roster looks like, if Kerr's even a part of it. I just don't think they can react right now simply out of we got to do something when they have no idea yet what their long-term plan really looks like.
I mean, their long-term plan isn't and can't be what they have right now. I mean, what's the average age of their starting five? 35, 36, far closer to 40 than it is 20. So, I mean, like this Golden State Warriors team could babysit the Thunder. So, you can't think
that might be your best line. We've been doing this show since August. That might be my favorite Caroline Fenton line of all time. That is well done by you.
It's true, though. You've got a daycare in OKC, and Golden State. They've got Grays. Draymond Green is turning into Draymond Gray. You can't think that how you're currently constructed will project for the next 5 years. You can't think that way. So, I'm with you that well-run organizations can't and do not make rash decisions. But they had to have been thinking behind the scenes, because we all see it. We can all acknowledge the age of this roster. They have to have been thinking behind the scenes. What is our path to not just completely shutting this window and being terrible for the next 5 to 10 years, but what is our path to use the tools at our disposal right now to keep our window open for the future? I think for right now, the Warriors, nothing should be off the table. You want to make calls on Draymond Green? We're listening. You want to make calls for Steph Curry? You know what? We're listening. That's something that I've been saying for the last several weeks, even before the Jimmy Butler injury. It doesn't mean that you have to trade Steph Curry. It doesn't mean that you're going to take pennies on the dollar and get a bag of peanuts in exchange for Steph Curry, because what you would need in return for what Steph means for this organization is going to have to make it worth your while. But if Draymond Green, if Steph Curry are your trade pieces to keeping the window open just a little bit longer and getting younger, getting assets in order to make your team better in the next 5 to 10 years versus the next 1 to 2, you have to listen on those calls. For right now, if I'm Golden State, nothing is off the table.
The most shocking part of all of this is that these things rarely just sort of die with a thud, right? Like usually it just sort of fades away with a whimper. This dynastic era of Golden State that has been so incredible is closed. It's over. And I don't think that there's anything they can do with the pieces they currently have on hand that's going to make them a championship caliber basketball team. So all we're going to be doing is asking ourselves every single year, man, can Steph find a way? That's going to be, we just want to watch Steph play, and it's awesome to see if he can Herculean lift. But as many times as you and I have talked about this, I mean, the method in a copycat league, the copycat blueprint's out there. OKC's young, and they're deep, and they're athletic. They're better. Oklahoma City's a better basketball team than Golden State is going to be for the next year or two, and that's not going to change. Golden State's not suddenly going to get younger. So to your point, Oklahoma City is a better basketball team. San Antonio is a better basketball team. Denver is a better basketball team. Just keep going up and down the list. Like, if your approach to how do we win a championship is maybe the window will stay open because everybody else will get hurt, That's not the Golden State we're used to. I think what we have to accept is that eras change. And the hardest part about this, the thing that scares me the most about this is, I say this all the time, I'm old enough to remember when we thought there would never be a time that the Chicago Bulls weren't at least a good basketball team, that the Chicago Bulls weren't at least one of the most relevant teams in the NBA. We were convinced through all of that the Bulls would always be the Bulls. The Golden State Warriors are at risk of becoming the Chicago Bulls, a team that in 20 years we talk about the great run that we saw and the amazing players that we saw, and then we realize that they no longer play relevant, meaningful basketball that people stay up late to watch. That's the real future for Golden State. And if they don't use this moment to rip it apart, rebuild it, and figure out how to start the long growth to getting back to who Golden State was, I fear that Golden State is going to become worse than bad. Golden State's not going to be bad enough to be bad. They'll just become irrelevant and forgotten. And that's a real thing that could happen in the next 20 years to Golden State to me.
And I always say warm fuzzies don't win you championships. Actually, Curt Cignetti at National Championship Media Day had a great line that said, you don't go to war with warm milk and cookies. And I love that. And I think it's true that I understand the concept and the idea of trading Steph Curry must make Warriors fans nauseous for what he means to that organization. But you don't win championships with warm fuzzies. You don't win championships with nostalgia. And you don't win championships by trying to hold on to the magic of what you had 5 years ago. That just doesn't make sense. Again, I'm not saying you have to move on from those players that mean so much to your organization, but just understand that those might just be the token golden pieces to getting back to where you once were. But Fitz, I also think there's another side of this as well, the Jimmy Butler side of things. Jimmy Butler is 36 years old. More than likely, by the time he comes back from injury, he'll be 37. He turns 37 in September. I view the normal ACL recovery timeline to be about 9 to 12 months. So Jimmy Butler will likely be 37 by the time he comes back from injury. Have we seen the last of Jimmy Butler? I know you can come back from an ACL tear. Look, guys do it all the time. It's kind of like no big deal. At this point in modern medicine, ACL tears are like a little boo-boo. But he's going to be 37 coming back from an ACL injury. Is Jimmy Butler done?
I mean, to your point, he comes back when he's 37, takes a minute to knock the rust off. He's really playing his best when he's mid-37, almost 38. I went to NBA.com out of curiosity, and I pulled the amount of miles that Jimmy Butler has run this year, because I think when we talk about ACLs, we need to talk about legs and amount of basketball knees in general. This year, Jimmy Butler in this season alone has covered 85.2 miles up and down the court, right? Just think about what we're talking about. You're talking about, and we're at about midseason. So extrapolate that forward. Like, the question is, a 37-year-old Jimmy Butler that's known for his intensity, and already was being load managed so that he could be the best of Jimmy Butler. You're going to tell me that you're going to trust that player to be able to put 150, 160 miles on that ACL knee at 37, 38 years old? When we start to do the math that way, I mean, the real answer to your question is, if I'm Jimmy Butler, I only want to come back if I'm playing somewhere where I can have a shot at a championship, where I can be an important part of something that's meaningful. That's not going to be Golden State. It may also mean that I have to play for less money than I think I'm worth in all of this. I think there's enough bricks stacking up that make me wonder if you're right, Caroline. Like, I certainly don't want this to be the last that we've seen of Jimmy Butler, but when you stack up the money and the contracts and the expectations, I wonder if you're right.
And I hate that. We're talking about a guy that has had so much success in this league, has had so much longevity in this league. And it is yet another story, and yet another page in the book of NBA injuries this year. It's so frustrating. It's annoying. It's annoying for us as fans. It's annoying for those prospective fan bases. It's frustrating that we don't get to see a certain level of basketball that we should be getting, because so many stars in this league are getting sidelined for ACLs, for Achilles tears. It's the NBA has an injury problem, and yet it strikes again and changes potentially the trajectory of the recent dynasty in the NBA.
Yeah, this is all going to be really interesting. Tom Haberstroh going to join us in about 45 minutes. We'll get Tom's thoughts on what all this means for Golden State, what it means for the future for Steph, We'll break it all down in great detail. We're just getting started covering this story. But coming up, another day means we have more coaching hires in the NFL. Two more dominoes have fallen. Did those teams get it right? We'll tell you next.
At the very top of my list, we need finality to Aspinall versus Gunn.
Yeah.
We need finality to
let's
this.
go,
Have to.
I just want to see this fight play out because guess what? It was a very entertaining fight and it was playing out in a way that I think a lot of people didn't think it would play out. So I need to see that fight. I have to see that fight. The division needs to see that fight. They both need to see that fight. They both earned it and deserved it, and we can't move on without that fight.
Do the Spurs still take Dylan Harper over Con Knipple and VJ Edgecombe?
I think for me, if I was to do it all over again, I would still take the best pick available, and that is Dylan Harper. I mean, you see he just is such an elite creator.
Prior to the draft, Mo, I was pretty consistent in saying that I would trade down and take a Con Knipple. Con at 4, I still think would have been the best possible outcome for San Antonio, and I feel that way even more strongly at this point.
All football teams are dams. Some of them have a ton of cracks. Some of them have a few cracks. It's all about who faces enough water pressure from their schedule to expose the cracks. Most of the time when you're playing in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're going to face several tests that will expose your cracks. I don't think Ohio State did this year. They faced Texas early in the year, and they just never faced enough pressure to expose the cracks.
Did you notice that the scoring totals had fallen in the new year, that the New Year's resolution apparently was to bring physicality back?
A couple of years ago when it was all of a sudden everybody scored 50, 60, 70. And then like the air went out of the ball for a month. And it was like in the middle of the season, the way the rules were being called kind of changed and scoring started to drop.
Look, to be fair, Dan, it could be, hey, everyone just magically figured out how to play legal defense.
We had to know once some of the prominent dominoes fell that more would be falling, and now they are coming at a rapid pace. Every day we get more head coaching moments that have been filled. The Dolphins hiring Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley as their head coach. Hafley completed his second interview with the team today, will be their new head coach. That yesterday from Adam Schefter, and then late last night, we get more news from Schefter as Robert SALEH has been hired as the head coach of the Titans. We're going to break both of these down. So let's start with Hafley to the Packers, or I should say to the Dolphins. Caroline, do you think that Miami got this one right?
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. John Eric Sullivan, the new general manager in Miami, he is a Packers lifer. He has been with the Green Bay organization since he was an intern, cutting clips and running around and, serving coffee. So it makes sense that John Eric Sullivan would go back to the Green Bay and hire somebody, and his first hiring, coaching hire of his GM tenure would go back to to somebody that he's incredibly familiar with. I view coaching hires very similar to like presidential elections. Like you always want what you didn't have. You want the opposite of what you just moved on from. You go from a Republican to a Democrat, Republican, Democrat. You just want to switch up with what you just experienced. Well, Jeff Hafley is like the antithesis of Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel, offensive mastermind. Jeff Hafley, defensive guy. Mike McDaniel, very eccentric personality. Jeff Hafley, very boring football guy. And I say boring guy, I don't mean that in a bad way. Sometimes boring football coaches are a very refreshing and good thing. So I think that it makes a lot of sense that is the direction with which the Dolphins would want to go. Did they get it right? It's fair to look back at some of the experience that we do have of Jeff Hafley as a head coach. It's not the perfect comparison because he was in college. He was the head coach at Boston College, had a losing record at Boston College. Is that a Jeff Hafley issue or is that a Boston College issue? I kind of lean it's the latter. It's a really difficult place to coach. It's a really difficult place to win. You're competing in the ACC against the Florida States, the Miamis of the Clemsons of the world. It's really difficult to recruit to Boston. So I don't think that's a perfect, thing to point to and say, well, Jeff Hafley can't do it because he didn't do it in college. I think you kind of throw that out a little bit. I'm intrigued to see how this goes. I think a defensive mind is a really interesting fit in the AFC East.
Look, I think you're right, too. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. And there was a lot of conversation about maybe the locker room not always showing up for Mike McDaniel the right way. And there were a lot of conversations about it. So I understand bringing in somebody that's very different from that. I just think we need to couch a little of this conversation around where the success lied. In fact, if you go back, and I'll credit wearegreenbay.com, had a great article about the changes in the Packers defense from pre-Micah injury to post-Micah injury. And, you know, for anyone that didn't see this, in the 13 games that Parsons played this season, the Packers had 34 sacks, 61 tackles for loss, and 84 quarterback hits. Those are remarkable numbers. In the 3 games without them after that point, Green Bay didn't register a single sack. They had 7 tackles for loss and only 11 quarterback hits. So I understand that losing Micah Parsons is significant, but when we talk about Hafley's success as a defensive coordinator in Green Bay, it is fair to at least look at the fact that they had one of the best players in the world and they were successful. They didn't have one of the best players in the world and they weren't as successful. And I'm not trying to question everything about a head coach based on his area of expertise, but I do think you have to look at Miami and say, okay, do they have a Micah Parsons? No, they do not. So for me, what you have is certainly a very qualified coach that's well respected across the league. But I'm looking at it and saying your production drop-off without your best player was staggering. I have no idea what your offensive identity is going to be. I don't know who you're bringing in as an offensive coordinator. I still don't know what your path is that you're going to have to an actual quarterback to figure out what's going on with Tua, or if you're going to try and fix that relationship. We have no idea how some of the other talent in the locker room is going to react. It's too early to know. I just think this is a very maybe hire to me. Like I want it to work out for the Dolphins. I want it to work out for Hafley. I want everybody to be particularly happy. I just don't know what actual evidence, what flags we are planting and saying, here are the concrete reasons that we believe this will fix the Miami Dolphins. They got their guy, but I just think this is a very time will tell sort of moment to me. And you know, that's not the only coaching hire we got last night. I want to get your thoughts on Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh has gone from being the defensive coordinator of the 49ers to now being the head football coach of the Tennessee Titans. In fairness, this is a team I always like to make sure people know our backgrounds a little bit. We both covered the Titans at different points in our career. We both lived in Nashville for a very long time. We are really familiar with this organization. So the Titans finalized this deal for Robert Saleh. How do you feel about it?
I love this for the Titans. I am shocked Robert Saleh took this job because Robert Saleh has already had to suffer through being the head coach of a dysfunctional organization. It's not very often that you get 2 cracks at the apple at being a head coach in the NFL. It's even way more rare to get 3 cracks at it. So for Robert Saleh to get another opportunity and to go to an organization that is dysfunctional ownership, dysfunctional leadership, has fired someone every single year for the last 5 years was shocking to me. But I had Robert Saleh go into the Baltimore Ravens because I thought Robert Saleh was one of the best coaching candidates on the market, and the Ravens were one of the best openings in this cycle. So I think the Titans got one of the best coaching candidates on the market. And the reason why I think it's very smart for the Titans for a few ways. The Titans are barren of talent on their roster. What Robert Saleh has shown that he's been able to do with the 49ers is to just work with what he's had. He hasn't had Fred Warner and hasn't had Nick Bosa for a large portion of this season. Yet still, the 49ers were still able to play good defense and stay in games. Now, look, you have to have some Jimmys and Joes at some point. You give up 40-plus points to the Seattle Seahawks. Not a great look for that defense. But I still think for a large portion of this season, this defense was able to stay together even without their 2 best players. Robert Saleh has a history of being able to work with what he's had. He's going to have to do that in Tennessee. The other thing I think that is a good thing for the Titans is that Robert Saleh does have head coaching experience. Similar to the Dolphins, they went with the opposite of what they just fired. Well, the Titans are going with a guy who's defensive-minded. Brian Callahan, their former head coach, that was a total and epic disaster, was an offensive mind. And Brian Callahan had 0 head coaching experience, had in any experience calling plays at all. He didn't call plays in Cincinnati. Zach Taylor called plays in Cincinnati. So what Robert Saleh has is experience as a head coach and experience failing as a head coach. Maybe that's important. Maybe you have to learn what not to do as a head coach to then learn what to do as a head coach. And I think the third thing is, and I thought it would be an offensive guy hired in Tennessee to work with Cam Ward. I think it's an interesting perspective from a defensive coordinator, because the only person that knows quarterbacks better than an offensive guy is a defensive guy. Defensive coaches want to have a quarterback that they hate to game plan against. Maybe Robert Saleh looks at what Cam Ward is able to do and says, I don't want to have to coach against that, so I want to coach that.
Yeah, I think obviously Cam Ward and the evaluation that Saleh had on Cam Ward had to be important because I don't think he would, to your point, go to a dysfunctional organization if he didn't believe in the quarterback. And it's fair to say the Titans are dysfunctional. The legend of Robert Saleh so far is better than the actual version of Robert Saleh. And yes, that defense was absolutely lights out. We talked about it this year with all the injuries. I think he's done a really nice job as the defensive coordinator. I just want to remind everybody, he was 20-36 as the Jets head coach. And even go deeper on that. 4-13 his first year, then 7-10, 7-10, 2-3, and fired. So you're talking about somebody that was never even remotely competitive with the Jets. And this is where you say, well, it's the Jets and they're a terrible organization. I'm not sure the Jets are any worse an organization top to bottom than the Titans are. This is where you say, well, the Jets never had a quarterback. Robert Saleh was in charge of the organization when they took Zach Wilson number 2 overall. So I need to know, again, I'm going to be that guy that says, what was your sales pitch? What was your interview for how you're going to develop your quarterback? Because there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Robert Saleh can coordinate a defense. There's no doubt in my mind that the Titans are going to be immediately a better football team because they have a better head football coach. And I do believe that Robert Saleh is going to be able to make the most. Jeffrey Simmons and a Robert Saleh defense, inject that in my veins. I'm excited for that. What's his plan for development on Cam Ward? Because otherwise, if you bring in somebody that's absolutely electric on the defensive side of the ball, but you don't properly develop Cam Ward, you're going to end up wasting a first overall pick in the draft. And as you and I both love to say, like, franchises fail quarterbacks more than quarterbacks fail franchises. What is Robert Saleh's actual plan to not fail Cam Ward? Because season 1 of Cam Ward had some ups, had some real downs. I'm not sure anybody really knows how good he is yet as a quarterback. So I'm nervous, even though I love Saleh in thought, and I love the brand of Saleh, and I love the job he's done as a defensive coordinator. I'm nervous about this for the Titans and what it means for the future of the quarterback position specifically.
And I think that's why the offensive coordinator hire is going to be absolutely mission critical for any of these defensive-minded head coaches that are taking over some of these jobs, like the Dolphins. The offensive coordinator is going to now be tasked with figuring out what the heck to do with the quarterback position in Miami. Same thing with the Titans. And I said it is so critical for the Titans to get this hire right at the head coaching position because you don't get very many opportunities to unruin a quarterback. And that's kind of what Brian Callahan tried his hardest to ruin Cam Ward. So what Robert Saleh now needs to find is the guy to develop Cam Ward. There's been a lot of reports, a lot of rumors, some rumblings that Robert Saleh would bring in Mike McDaniel if he was hired as a head coach somewhere. So Mike McDaniel, I know, is going to be interviewing for head coaching positions elsewhere. If he doesn't get a head coaching position elsewhere, I think that would be a great fit. Mike McDaniel, the offensive genius with Cam Ward, and then Mike McDaniel kind of gets an opportunity to, I didn't want to say repair his reputation because I don't think his reputation was tarnished in Miami, but I do think it can be beneficial for head coaches that were fired to take a step back and be a coordinator and kind of rejuvenate their image a little bit. So if Robert Saleh is able to land Mike McDaniel as an OC, I think that's a slam dunk.
Yeah, look, whoever lands Mike McDaniel as an OC, should they do that, suddenly we view that entire hire differently. You are 1,000% right about that.
Totally.
So with those two names off the board, we only have a few openings left. Who's the biggest name left to you, the guy that is going to be most coveted?
I think it's Clint Kubiak, and he kind of follows that model of young, up-and-coming coordinator to kind of take that next leap. So I think that you're going to start to see Clint Kubiak's name hover around the Bills job, hover around the Ravens job. I thought Clint Kubiak with the Raiders would be a fascinating match. So I think that Clint Kubiak now becomes like the hottest guy that doesn't have a date to the prom.
Yeah, I think you're right. Although, go back and check it out on YouTube. We just talked to Jon Feliciano, and now I'm all in on Dragon. Like, look, when your nickname's Dragon, like Davis Webb, when your nickname's Dragon Webb, I want the Raiders to have Dragon Webb as my head coach. So, look, I'm all in on some of these offensive minds, particularly when you look at the jobs that are going to be remaining open. It's just so much of it about who's going to develop a quarterback. Like all of us that watched the national championship last night, the number of tweets you've seen from smart people that have said, hey, this is much of this is going to be about how he's developed. I think you're going to have to make sure you have the right people in place to actually develop somebody like Fernando Mendoza. So we'll keep our eyes on it. What I know is it's another day, and we still have time left in the show. So I'm sure somebody will get hired. Coming up, we will get some thoughts on everything, 100%, on everything we saw last night. T-Bob Hebert joins the show coming up next.
One school that's doing some work in there right now, very quietly, is the Florida Gators. At the time of us taping this, Florida is sitting there with a top 10 class. When you're like, JD, wait a second. Florida's got a top 10 class? Who have they added? And I think this portal class in general for Jon Sumrall is a good reflection of just the overall vibe, attitude, persona of what you're going to get from Jon Sumrall during his time in Gainesville.
And I've been thinking about the Denver Nuggets here for a little bit. Jamal Murray's gonna have to carry a torch during this program. Like I know it's the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air looking around, and no furniture around, but hey, he's gonna have to figure it out. What I will say that helps Denver is the return of this version of Aaron Gordon. And I very specifically mean this version of Aaron Gordon. And I know you might have a twinge of concern that he may do too much, but it was good early and they need it now.
Have you had a chance to kind of unpack all of it?
Yeah, I don't know that I have yet. I think it's just another reminder of how wild pro football can be. I've lived it so many times. I mean, I think going back a little over 2 years ago when I tore my Achilles to now, there's been a lot of curveballs and a lot of change. And I was told a long time ago in pro football, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I'm reminded of that time and again.
How long do you feel like that window is with Lamar, though?
I think you can get 2 more years of Lamar as a locked-in top 5 guy. And then I think after that is when it's like, okay, maybe he ages to more being a top 12 guy, which is still good. Maybe more of a tier 2 guy in my brain. And then it kind of ages from there. Russ went from like a tier 2 guy that fell off to a tier 3, tier 4 guy. You're going to have that drop off at some point in your career.
A big smile out of Curt Cignetti. Who knew it was possible? That's right before he told the world he was just going to go get himself a beer. I don't blame him. He's a national champion right now. Speaking of smiling, we now welcome on former LSU offensive lineman, one of the personalities of Wake Up Barstool, T-Bob Hebert joining us, man. Are you okay? You're donning the gear. Are you a little bit stunned in a moment of honesty? Are you a little bit stunned that we are sitting here talking about Indiana as the national champions?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'll say it like this. I'm not stunned in that I've been a massive Indiana advocate for the past 2 years. I thought they were awesome last year. I thought it was ridiculous, the narrative that started to develop around them that, they weren't actually that good when like the 2 teams they lost to were the 2 best teams that played for the national championship. I chose them to win the championship at the beginning of this tournament. Every single game, so I'm not stunned recently, but how could you not be stunned if you look at the entirety of their history? I mean, it's the greatest college football story we've ever seen. It's one of the greatest sports stories that we've ever seen. Here's the losingest program in college football history that just capped off a 16-0 perfect national championship run in which they went through Ohio State, they went through Alabama, they went through Oregon, they went through Miami, they went through all of the blue bloods, all of the old guard to get it done. I mean, you can find crazy stat after crazy stat. Probably the one that just came across my phone that blew my mind was they won 3 bowl games in the last month. They had won 3 bowl games in their entire school history previous to this. Like before beating Bama in the Rose Bowl, their last bowl win was in the 1991 Copper Bowl. And here's what I want to say is that I like to I like to pontificate and be grandiose and look deep for meaning and whatnot. And how could you not be inspired by the story of the Indiana Hoosiers? And I don't mean just if like you're a football coach or a football fan, though definitely the hope effect is real. And they have now erased excuses for other schools. And although you may not have Curt Cignetti, you can at least try to be Curt Cignetti. And that's great, but it extends beyond football. Right? What Indiana has taught us this year is don't let people define who you can be, because society's going to tell you this is your ceiling, this is your limit, this is what you're good for, this is all you're capable of. And it's all too easy to sit back and accept that and say, okay, well, I can work my ass off. I'll never be Pat McAfee. I'll never be this. I'll never be that. Screw that. Okay. What Indiana has shown you is you define yourself. And I'm not saying that you're going to go 16-0 and win a Natty or whatever the relative equivalent would be in your life. What I am saying is there's no excuse not to go balls to the wall and to try and to do everything that you can so that when you look in the mirror at the end of the day, you say, you know what? At least I didn't let somebody define me. I defined me. I gave it my all. And if we all did that, we would end up in a better spot than we are currently, even if it isn't with the ultimate storybook ending that Fernando Mendoza, Curt Cignetti, and the Indiana Hoosiers now have.
Well, it's the ultimate story of the American dream. It's rags to riches. It doesn't matter where you came from. You can find yourselves at the mountaintop too. But I look at how Curt Cignetti did it. And there's so many ways in college football now that you can microwave success. You can invest just a boatload of money into a roster, get every 4- and 5-star across the country, get all of the transfers from Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State. But that's not how Curt Cignetti did it. He got transfers from JMU. He didn't have a single 5-star on the roster. Fernando Mendoza from Cal winning the Heisman Trophy. I know that college football is such a copycat sport. Can other coaches and other programs across the country replicate how Curt Cignetti turned Indiana into a national champion?
So I guess this kind of dovetails perfectly with what I was just talking about, where, like, again, I don't know that we're going to see somebody hit the heights that Cignetti has, because it's a perfect storm of a coach who's been in football his entire life but has never given the breaks, had to go earn those breaks, is a game planning genius combined with getting that. Like Indiana was the ultimate whole is greater than the sum of its parts team. But to your point, we are, and this is what I love about college football right now, okay? We have literally seen the fabric of the game change under our feet. I mean, tectonic shifts in how you build rosters and how the game is constructed and played, are really constructed off the field to then play on the field. And what that means is these changes are so sweeping that nobody really knows what the best practices are. Right. And each additional year that we get into this new era, we're figuring out, okay, well, maybe this is how should we like we're gathering data to say this is how we should approach things. And so, yes, I think there are massive lessons to be learned, not just from Cignetti, but even if you look at guys like Bob Chesney, what he did at JMU this year, what Sumrall did at Tulane, surviving all their roster turnover, making it to a college football playoff. I think you're seeing like you mentioned going and getting like one piece of data that I would say. You're mentioning going and getting like the 5-stars off of the Alabama and the Ohio States, the roster of these very talented guys that didn't play. A lot of people seem to be going the other way where they say, you know what? Instead, we're going to go with the guys from lower levels, but that have proven success. Instead of trying to bet on the potential, let's go get a guy who was an all-conference, all-American on the Division II level, right? Looking at Trinidad Chambliss, a champion and winner on the Division II level, and let's see if he can bring it up. And that seems to have paid a lot of dividends. So that's one of the things that I'm most excited for this offseason is to really try to get in the lab and parse through this new era and what have we learned through 2 years. And one thing that I learned that I think should be celebrated here, and it's a misconception in some ways. Everybody talks about how old Indiana was. Well, Miami's average starting age was older than that of Indiana. And if you look throughout this playoffs, it was veteran teams, one and all. And as much as we wanted to cry, or a lot of people, there's a lot of hand-wringing over NIL and the transfer portal, without a doubt, one silver lining benefit, in my opinion, has been talented football players staying in college because now they can get paid. They can continue to develop. I mean, you look at early entrants for this spring's NFL draft. I think it's like 40 right now, 40 underclassmen. A few years ago, it was 130. So players are able to now stick around, develop, get better, and it leads to high quality football. And what was last night, if not a beautiful, high quality football game? I mean, it's impossible for me to escape boxing metaphors when I think about a big football game. And people talk about the sweet science of boxing. Last night was the sweet science of football. Super high execution, ultimate physicality, guys putting their bodies on the line, great D-line play, great offensive line play, pounding the rock, big moments, big high leverage moments where guys had to come away with the play to be successful. It was just a fantastic game all around. And in part, that is due to this new NIL era where the quality of football gets better because the players get better because they can stick around longer.
So, T-Bob, I'm in love with the goober. I'm just going to announce this to the world because Fernando Mendoza may be a goober in the interviews, but my God, as a Raiders fan, when he dove into the end zone, that play, I screamed in the bar, that's my quarterback. I screamed it. What's my level of excitement allowed to be for the thought of Fernando Mendoza fixing my beloved Raiders?
Oh, dude, I would be ecstatic. I mean, what doesn't he have, right? He has the arm talent. Like, we've broken down film here on Wake Up Barstool. We do it every Friday with Mikey Kadick, and some of the throws, these out routes, like there's NFL throws all over the field. He has all of the intangibles. He's a leader of men. You heard him in the postgame last night, right? He said, I'm willing to die for my guys out there. They're willing to die for me, and that's why we're national champions. Like, guys will follow this dude into battle. You don't have to worry about him getting into trouble. He's going to study his ass off. Like, I think Fernando Mendoza, and he's giant, and he's athletic. So, like, I think he's a slam dunk number one pick. But I want to talk about the goober element here. Because I'm a massive nerd, and I really enjoyed the new James Gunn Superman movie. And I think one of the basic theme of that movie applies to Mendoza so well, where the theme of this new Superman movie is essentially this idea that, like, you know, maybe sincerity and kindness, maybe that's the new punk rock. Like, maybe that's the new counterculture. And we live in this age, this day and age where everybody's so cynical and so fearful of being sincere, so fearful of being genuine or showing passion or excitement or nerding out about something or allowing themselves to not just be too cool for everything. And to me, Fernando Mendoza is the antithesis of the modern internet cynical too cool age in which we live. And so I am head over heels in love with the gooberish genuine sincerity that Fernando Mendoza displays every time that he speaks. I think he is the perfect antidote to the times in which we live, and I love to celebrate him for that.
He's so precious.
I know.
He is the cutie patootie of the year. I just want to give him a sweet little hug. He's just and then you watch him play and he's a dog.
And that's the thing, right? It's all of that sincerity and goodness and kindness, but he's killing you with a smile on his face. Because at the end of the day, that's a tough son bitch. I mean, look at last night. I mean, again, because them refs, shout out to the refs last night. They were letting them boys play. And they let Miami get in some shots. And even if the flag is thrown there, like when Mendoza gets busted under the chin, he's carrying out the fake, even if the flag is thrown there, I think that's a smart move by Miami. Like, let's hit this guy. Let's see what he can handle. And look, whether it was him getting rocked that first play of the Ohio State game, last night you saw his arm after the game, just one giant walking bruise his throwing arm was, diving into the end zone, running guys over. Like, to combine that toughness with that sincerity, that's where I think the leader of men, perfect alchemy is achieved.
Who does he remind you of? I keep getting Kirk Cousins comps for Fernando Mendoza, and I feel like that's partly because they both kind of have that very nerdy, sweet, goobery personality. But when you watch Fernando Mendoza play, who's a comp that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I understand Cousins from the personality standpoint, though. I have talked to a bunch of Indiana, or I shouldn't say a bunch of Indiana guys. From what I understand, Fernando Mendoza does do a really good job of straddling the line where he can be such a good person, but like the boys still love him, and he can still kick back and have some beers with the boys. Which again, that's how you achieve leadership status. I'll cede to my old man here. So my old man played 15 years professional football. He knows the quarterback position inside and out, and he's been saying since week one that Fernando Mendoza reminds him of Jared Goff. And he was super high on Jared Goff coming out of college. Obviously, Jared Goff's gone on to be absolutely fantastic in the NFL. And so I would just say that that's the name that my dad has constantly brought up when talking about Mendoza.
Oh, my level of excitement is just through the roof. You do that to me, brother. Hey, we appreciate your time. Make sure you check him out. Obviously, you can hang out with him. Wake Up Barstool is where you can find him, and follow him all over social media. It's always a delight when you join us, and we appreciate it. And for the next several months, I'm just going to be on one. So if you see somebody constantly in airports wearing a Mendoza jersey, I'm just going to find all of them. Thanks for the time, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, and it looks like you got a franchise changer, man. Maybe so. It's exactly what the Raiders need. We'll see what the coach is going to be. But yeah, thank y'all so much. Love y'all. Have a great day, guys.
Hugs
Thank you,
at the
T.
Super
Appreciate
Bowl.
ya.
He's Team Hebert hanging out with us. Always doing great work. All right, coming up. Both of these men need a head coach. The question is, which opening is better? We'll answer it.
Penn State has imported Iowa State. It's the best way I could explain it. Penn State has now taken Rocco Beck. They took RB1. They took wide receiver 1. They took 3 offensive linemen. I detest that this is how college football works at the moment, but it's the way it works at the moment. And that is, when you take a head coach, part of the thinking behind hiring the head coach is who he can bring with him. And in Matt Campbell's case, it was basically whoever he wants.
I'm very fascinated to see which direction they go here, because I think that Roman, this is the deal with him. He's not terrible. He's not offensive as an offensive coordinator, but he can get you to a certain point. You need somebody else to get you to the next point. I think he's done a good job with Herbert, getting him to run more and getting him to push the ball down the field. Now I'd like to see, someone kind of just, again, give him some more quicker options. That's the type of stuff I'd like to see from the next coach.
Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gahn, that needs to be resolved, right? Hamzat Chimaev versus Sean Strickland. But I will accept Hamzat Chimaev versus Fluffy Hernandez. If Fluffy beats Sean Strickland, I'll take either of those. Here's another one of my, but you accept these as secondary.
100%.
Armin Sarukian versus UFC lightweight champion. We cannot just keep having Armin doing grappling matches and eating and all this stuff.
I'm kind of okay with it.
No, I'm not. I know you love it.
You get the first pick in the underrated player draft. Who you taking?
Jalen Duren has never made an All-Star game. He's never made an All-NBA team. He's gotten so much better as a scorer this year. Jalen Duren is like a legit All-Star this year. And so because everybody talks about the Detroit situation like it's trash and Cade Cunningham, I'm going to say he's still a little bit underrated, and he's my number 1 pick.
It's going to be very interesting how the Bills head coach opening changes the Ravens' course of action. It's going to be some serious competition for candidates. And y'all don't get it twisted just because we haven't seen these candidates named at this point or finalized at this point. We got to remember that if you are a coach of a team that is still playing, you can't be interviewed right now. So there is just sort of a holding pattern for some of these coordinators and position coaches that are well revered. So the question becomes, Caroline, which job opening is better, Bills or Ravens?
I think those are the two best job openings because these are two teams that are both ready-made, tailor-made to make a run for the Super Bowl. But I think the better job, like if I'm the number 1 candidate out there on the streets and I get to choose between the Bills and the Ravens, I think the Ravens is a better job. I think I would rather have Josh Allen as my quarterback than Lamar Jackson. But I look at, and it's not like Lamar Jackson's any sort of slouch, 2-time MVP, could have been 3-time MVP. I'll take that pretty good consolation prize. I think the Ravens roster as a whole in its entirety is better than the Bills roster. I have big time question marks about the receiver position in Buffalo. I got big time question marks about the longevity of that defense. How much longer is Tre'Davious White going to be playing? They've got an aging defense and an often injured defense. So I think the Ravens roster is better. And I also would rather be, strangely enough, the division that I thought would be the most competitive in football this year. I would rather play in the AFC North and the AFC East. The Patriots might go right back to the Super Bowl. They've got a first-year head coach in Mike Vrabel and a second-year young quarterback. Whereas you look at the AFC North and you have the Steelers with a job opening. You have the Browns, which are a total and epic mess. Yes, there's Joe Burrow in the Bengals, but I don't trust Zach Taylor. I think Zach Taylor is an utter and complete ding-dong. So I feel like the AFC North is far more open than the AFC East is at this point with the way that the Patriots are playing. So I would lean the Ravens a better job.
I think your point is a really valid one about the roster as a whole. I do have some concerns. The Ravens defense needs to be fixed all over the place. And Derrick Henry, as much as we're never allowed to talk about his age because he's just a unicorn, Derrick Henry's going to
defies physics.
He's 32. So Derrick Henry's 32 years old. So we are getting a little bit long in the tooth for a running back that takes the beating that Derrick Henry takes. And that's been a huge part of the Ravens' offensive success. So I do think that there are some holes with the Ravens that concern me. Frankly, if we're looking at the running back position for the next 3 or 4 years, Buffalo's in a much better situation. My concern with Buffalo is that it's not that they haven't really tried. They can't address the wide receiver position. I'm not sure they've tried hard enough, but as long as Bean is still in charge of the thing, I still don't trust them to be able to put the right weapons around Josh Allen. So I think I'm with you. This one's really close, though. I could see where, depending on the style of offense you want to run, especially because I'm with you, I also prefer Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson. Doesn't mean that I hate Lamar Jackson. Stop. It just means that I prefer Josh Allen. So I think if you combine the running back and the quarterback situation, I can find a lot of love for the Bills. I have a really tough time with this one because I think you're also right. The Bills division, while the Jets are always going to be a joke, the rest of that division, I still think Miami has some talent, and the Patriots are really stinking good. So whether that's lucky or sustainable, I don't know. But right now, there's no reason to trust. I think the Steelers are about to hit an absolute lull. I'm not sure we can ever trust the Browns, and I'm not sure why we trust the Bengals. So I'm with you. That brings me to Joe Brady, though. Joe Brady, Tom Pelissero are reporting that the Ravens are bringing in, this is important, the Ravens are bringing in Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady for a second interview. He's been linked to the Bills opening. Also, that happened right away because the presumption is that obviously Josh Allen really likes him. So if you're Joe Brady, are you going to Buffalo? Are you going to Baltimore? Are you going somewhere else? What are you doing?
I would stay if I were him. And that is completely dependent on, with a massive asterisk of, does he believe in the organization? Does he believe in Brandon Beane? Because clearly the organization believes in Brandon Beane, or else they wouldn't have not just retained him, but they wouldn't have promoted him to president of football operations if they didn't believe in his football acumen and abilities. But let's make the assumption that he does. I would stay. There's a certain, I think, value to familiarity with a roster, familiarity with your quarterback, and familiarity with an organization as a whole. It's exactly where Joe Brady finds himself. There's always a certain ramping up period with coaches, coordinators, quarterbacks, and the entire roster. You kind of just have to figure out how everybody works. There's always that 1 to 2 year buffer period for young coaches, right? And we give that for a reason, because sometimes these things just take time. Joe Brady doesn't have that ramping up period in Buffalo. He and Josh Allen know each other incredibly well. They don't have to build that rapport. They've been building it the last several years. So if I were him, I would stay in Buffalo.
If I were him, I'd leave. And, because I've just watched this organization, I think while Sean McDermott deserves some of the blame for where the Bills certainly fell, I think a big part of it is just the lack of talent in the right places repeatedly over and over and over again. And if I'm Joe Brady, I've been dealing with that. Like, I'm looking around the room saying, do I believe that this organization can give me the pieces to play with that they could never seem to put in the right spot for Sean McDermott? I don't think so. So I'm walking into a situation where I know the devil I know versus the devil I don't, but the devil I know has not been able to put the right things in place to put to keep McDermott even employed at this point. So if I'm Joe Brady, I'm definitely looking elsewhere. Also, I think there's something about just stepping into a new spot in a new situation where you're not suddenly trying to fill anybody's shoes. You're not dealing with a roster that might see you some kind of way because you've been an offensive coordinator versus now you're a head coach. While comfort and continuity can matter in some situations, I think if you're the Bills, part of what you were blowing this up for is you wanted to blow this up for a new voice. How new can you get for somebody that's already been in the building? So Joe Brady's certainly an in-demand coaching candidate. I just think Baltimore would actually make a lot more sense. The more we narrow in on it, the more I feel like Baltimore for Joe Brady, and then either, now we now know him as Dragon Davis Webb or Brian Daboll for Buffalo seems to make a lot of sense if they're comfortable bringing Daboll in, considering the failures he had for the Giants.
And I will always put a little bit of a caution flag up for young coordinators who have never been coaches before and have only coordinated elite quarterbacks, or at least only had success coordinating elite quarterbacks. Part of the reason is because I've seen and witnessed the Brian Callahan experience in Tennessee, that he didn't call plays, that he was coordinating Joe Burrow. How difficult is your job really when you are coordinating for one of the most elite quarterbacks in the entire National Football League? So I do have that question mark about Joe Brady. If it's in Buffalo, if it's in Baltimore, wherever it might be, I will be looking at it through that lens with a little bit of skepticism. Experience matters, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get answers sooner than later on all of it. I know everybody's waiting to see what their next chapters look like with their new head coaches. In the meantime, Golden State's trying to figure out what to do with the chapter they're in right now, considering the massive injury news we got last night. The question is, what does Jimmy Butler's injury mean for that man? Tom Haberstroh going to join us next. We'll get his thoughts.
At the very top of my list, we need finality to Aspinall versus Gunn.
Yeah.
We need finality to this.
Have to.
I just want to see this fight play out because guess what? It was a very entertaining fight and it was playing out in a way that I think a lot of people didn't think it would play out. So I need to see that fight. I have to see that fight. The division needs to see that fight. They both need to see that fight. They both earned it and deserved it, and we can't move on without that fight.
Do the Spurs still take Dylan Harper over Con Knipple and VJ Edgecombe?
I think for me, if I was to do it all over again, I would still take the best pick available, and that is Dylan Harper. I mean, you see, he just is such an elite creator.
Prior to the draft, Mo, I was pretty consistent in saying that I would trade down and take a Con Knipple. Con at 4, I still think would have been the best possible outcome for San Antonio, and I feel that way even more strongly at this point.
All football teams are dams. Some of them have a ton of cracks. Some of them have a few cracks. It's all about who faces enough water pressure from their schedule to expose the cracks. Most of the time when you're playing in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're going to face several tests that will expose your cracks. I don't think Ohio State did this year. They faced Texas early in the year, and they just never faced enough pressure to expose the cracks.
Did you notice that the scoring totals had fallen in the new year, that the New Year's resolution apparently was to bring physicality back?
A couple of years ago when it was all of a sudden everybody scored 50, 60, 70. And then like the air went out of the ball for a month. And it was like in the middle of the season, the way the rules were being called kind of changed and scoring started to drop. Look, to be fair, Dan, it could be, hey, everyone just magically figured out how to play legal defense.
NBA fans woke up to this tweet this morning. Breaking: Golden State Warriors star Jimmy Butler suffered a season-ending torn right ACL, sources tell ESPN. So we're going to break it down with Tom Haberstroh now. He joins us, co-host of The Big Number. You can find his title tiers on TomTheFinder.com. Tom, always appreciate your time. Initial reaction to this moment and what it means for Golden State. Obviously losing Jimmy is so key to them. What do they do now?
Yeah, the first reaction is this just sucks. There's no two ways about it. Jimmy Butler has been on an absolute heater lately against, a Western Conference field that the Warriors were starting to find their way. They were 12-4 in their last 16 games. And when you talk about Jimmy Butler himself, he was basically averaging 25-5 over the last month or so. And this is just a devastating blow to the Golden State Warriors, not just their title chances this year, but also to the whole Steph era. When you talk about Jimmy Butler and what he meant to Draymond Green and Stephen Curry, he was the championship missing piece. He gave them a shot. And now without Jimmy Butler, who's making about $50 million this year and next year, it's a big cap hit to have a guy who's not playing. But also, this isn't a guy like Klay Thompson when he tore his ACL when he was 29 years old. It's not like you could project going forward, be like, all right, it's a gap year. We'll come back and we'll have Klay Thompson back in the fold in his prime. This is a guy who's 36 years old, Jimmy Butler, and for a team that was just hitting its stride, a team that I actually upgraded in my title tiers and felt like the Golden State Warriors are ready. They're ready to compete for a title again. Brandon Pajemski was playing well. I think the team kind of turned the page on the Jonathan Kuminga situation, and with Jimmy Butler tearing his ACL last night, I have no choice but to downgrade them from the complete title picture. Steph Curry's great. Draymond Green up and down this season. It's just a devastating blow to the Golden State Warriors' chances, and kind of everything is on the table now for the Warriors.
And Jimmy Butler's injury, there's two sides of it, in my opinion. There's the Warriors side, where they go from here, and there's also the Jimmy Butler side of things. Like you said, he's 36 years old. He'll be 37 at the beginning of next season. Can he come back from this? Is this the end of Jimmy Butler?
I certainly think with his competitive spirit, he'll play in the NBA again. I think he will come back. It's just at what kind of level of playing. His impact on the floor right now is an all NBA, all-star caliber player. With an ACL at age 36, you have real questions about the level that he can play at. According to InStreetClothes.com, the injury database, Jeff Stotts, who is the guru behind that website, since 2005, there's only been one player older than Jimmy Butler currently is to suffer an ACL tear, and that was Birdman Chris Anderson, who a few years back was 38 years old, and his career was over after that. We certainly hope that Jimmy Butler has a different fate than Chris Anderson, who wasn't the kind of player that Jimmy Butler was and is. And so what you're seeing for Jimmy Butler is maybe a year off, coming back at the second half of next season in hopes of securing another contract in the NBA. And that's the thing that, unfortunately, the way that today's NBA works is it's a devastating injury for Jimmy Butler personally, but for his career, what other teams are looking at is, all right, he's got a $54 million salary for this season and a $57 million salary for next season. And then his contract is off the books. So if you're the Golden State Warriors, it's not like this is a 3-year, 4-year commitment to Jimmy Butler. And so there is an opportunity for him to come back next season and kind of replenish his stock around the league and prove that he can still play at a high level. So I don't think this is a career ender for Jimmy Butler, but certainly a huge step back. We just don't have a lot of examples of guys deep into their 30s suffering an ACL tear and coming back. You know, Kyrie Irving suffered his ACL tear last year, still hasn't come back, and we don't know what kind of condition he is for the Dallas Mavericks if and when he does return this season. So we're literally kind of uncharted territory with Jimmy Butler, not only the caliber of player at age 36 suffering this kind of career-threatening injury, but also the Warriors are trying to win right now. And the Dallas Mavericks, with Kyrie Irving coming back, I'm not so sure they're in the same boat. I do think that the Golden State Warriors have a lot on the table right now, a lot of questions. And the first question I would ask is one to Stephen Curry is, what do you want to do? You want to stay here in Golden State and wait this out with Jimmy Butler? Or do you want to contend right now for a championship somewhere else and make a late career change? He obviously would want to be the Dirk Nowitzki, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan for the Warriors, but this is a guy who's playing at a level of 30 points per game every single night. He can still bring it. And so the question for me is, where do the Warriors go from here? And I think it all starts with number 30.
Yeah, stick there then, Tom. How does this impact the trade deadline? It's only a couple weeks away.
Well, The silver lining here, Jason, is that this did happen before the trade deadline. So the Warriors could pivot here and upgrade mid-season. If this happened a month from now or a couple weeks from now, they'd be in a really tough spot because they don't have the opportunity to trade and upgrade at the deadline and bring in a real player that can fill a lot of the stuff that Jimmy Butler does. Now, what do the Warriors have? Well, they got Jonathan Kuminga's $25 million contract that they could trade, put into a deal. Jimmy Butler's $54 million salary for this season. And they have just about every first-round pick going forward they could put into a deal. So you could see the Warriors sitting down at a big conference table there at Chase Center with Mike Dunleavy Jr. and with Joe Lacob, the owner of the Warriors, and say, all right, how many different pathways do we have here? Because we could run this back next season, wait till Jimmy Butler comes back and just see this through with this core. Or we could trade Jimmy Butler's contract right now for someone like Anthony Davis, Karl Anthony Towns, Paul George, guys who are at the, 2-3 year commitments going forward that teams might want to move off that money. Jimmy Butler this summer becomes an expiring contract, and that could be an advantageous position for a team like the Dallas Mavericks or the Philadelphia 76ers, kind of going with a youth movement. Or, of course, when you're looking at the New York Knicks with Karl Anthony Towns, Towns has another year in addition to Jimmy Butler's contract. Same with Anthony Davis and same with Paul George. So it's a real question for the Golden State Warriors at this point is, do you kind of double down with this core in the same way that the Giannis Antetokounmpo Milwaukee Bucks have doubled down around Giannis Antetokounmpo and say, look, we're going to do everything in our power to maximize this window with Steph Curry and Draymond Green until the wheels fall off, until Steph Curry hangs it up. We're going to keep going and push all the chips to the middle. And they certainly have the assets to go after a big name player, whether it's Anthony Davis, Karl Anthony Towns, or even Paul George, who someone they were after a couple years ago before he joined the Philadelphia 76ers. Now with Draymond Green and Steph Curry without Jimmy Butler, this is an opportunity for the Warriors to upgrade at the deadline and see if those other teams are willing to take on Jimmy Butler's contract, which becomes expiring next season, and they can wipe off their big salaries off the books a year sooner than they otherwise could.
Do you think that there is a chance that Steph Curry is playing elsewhere in the future?
Oh yeah, I think there's a real chance. I mean, Steph Curry, we've seen how much he enjoys playing with LeBron James and Team USA, and with of course the All-Star games of years past. I would love to see it personally, Steph and LeBron playing together on the same team in the NBA, not just in the All-Star or in Team USA. And the Lakers right now are sputtering. And so you could see a scenario in which Stephen Curry and LeBron say, hey, how do we link up now that Jimmy Butler's hurt? This is kind of an interesting situation for Steph Curry because, of course, Jimmy Butler, with him in uniform, they were a title contender, 46-22 with Jimmy Butler in uniform. And that equates to a 55-win team over the last 2 years. They've basically been playing at a number 2 seed, number 3 seed level with Jimmy Butler. But without him, Steph Curry has to realize they're 2-5 without Jimmy Butler in uniform over the last 2 seasons. That's a 23-win team equivalent. So he has to be real pragmatic about this situation and talk to potentially LeBron James or talk to somebody, I don't know, with the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets just retired number 30. His father's number is going up in the rafters. Del Curry, they just announced that they're going to retire that number. So it'd be a little an amazing story of Steph Curry potentially coming back home to where he grew up in Charlotte, just with a different number. Or maybe that 30 they delay that rafter raising of his jersey and retire it a little after Steph Curry comes. But I do think that Steph Curry, the door was always open to him going elsewhere, but it was only open a crack. Now Jimmy Butler, his injury certainly opens it up a little bit more than that. And I still think he's going to be a Warrior for life. But if he says, look, this has run its course here, I want to compete at the highest level, where can I do that? I think that conversation becomes a lot more real right now.
To be clear, though, Tom, if he's going to team up with LeBron, that would be in LA. It would not be LeBron going to Golden State, correct?
It would be tough with the contracts that they have. Austin Reeves is not a big contract. It's not like you could swap Austin Reeves and get Stephen Curry. The cap stuff right now with the apron rules, it makes things super complicated. You probably would have to bring in 3-team or 4-team deals in order to get a swap like that happening. But the Lakers could pivot in ways that, they just acquired Luka Doncic this time last year. So everything is on the table. But Steph Curry with his contract, it's going to be almost impossible for the Lakers to acquire him to pair with Luka and LeBron James. Just they have too many high salaries on the books unless something crazy happens. I don't see him linking up with LeBron in LA, but something where LeBron goes to Golden State is a lot more likely. And then you move Jimmy Butler's contract to another team packaged with draft picks, because the only draft pick that the Warriors have outgoing that they don't own is 2030 going to Washington, and it's top 20 protected. So we're talking the 27 pick, the 29 pick. They could send these multiple first-round picks into a deal, attach that to Jimmy Butler's $54 million contract that becomes an expiring next season, and reload. So it'll be interesting what the Warriors do from here. But I got my eyes on Anthony Davis, on Karl-Anthony Towns, and of course, Paul George, veterans on teams that might be looking to offload those players long-term money for a guy like Steph Curry. I mean, for a guy to potentially pair next to Steph Curry.
You mentioned Karl-Anthony Towns. The Knicks lost again last night. There's been a lot of buzz about Karl-Anthony Towns potentially getting dealt at the trade deadline. Is that the answer for the Knicks? And if not, what is the answer for New York?
Caroline, your guess is as good as mine. The New York Knicks, after winning the NBA Cup, have been a disaster. Defensively, they haven't been able to stop anybody. Karl-Anthony Towns before the season was not really glowing about Mike Brown's offense, saying, yeah, we'll see. We'll see about how things go. It wasn't like, yeah, I'm really excited to play for Mike Brown. Things are great. Can't wait to get training camp started and playing for this team. And there's just been kind of a weird vibe around the Knicks lately, and especially when you got two guys offensively skewed, Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. It puts so much pressure on Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson to defend and offensive rebound and cover up for their defensive liabilities. And with Karl-Anthony Towns, it's one thing if you got Jalen Brunson. He's a small guy. We get it. Like, there's a lot of successful smaller players who are responsible for the offensive engine. But if you're a defensive, or if you're a big man and you're not able to play at a high level as a rim protector, it makes things so much more compromising for the team as a whole. So Karl-Anthony Towns, if he's not averaging 25 a game and being an all-NBA talent offensively, which he isn't right now, it is a really tough look for the New York Knicks if they're not getting that from him offensively. Defensively, he's not that guy. So right now, I can understand why Knicks fans are just looking at this roster and be like, what happened over the last month? And Karl-Anthony Towns is a big reason why they've taken a big step back lately, is he just hasn't been himself. And I wonder if he is looking at this and saying, look, I'm not able to be the best version of myself with the Knicks. Maybe I look elsewhere.
All right, so Tom, let's go to something positive here. Even in a loss, I was sitting there last night, even in a loss, watching the Celtics give the Pistons absolutely everything they could handle in Detroit. Right, like that game was absolutely incredible. And the whole time I kept thinking about all the videos we're seeing now about Tatum out there, and everybody's looking at the warm ups, everybody's looking at the Duncan. Is there some hope, if you're a Celtics fan right now, that you're going to see this Disney storybook ending? Tatum is back, and the Celtics go on a massive run that takes them to the NBA championship.
Man, I don't see Jason Tatum getting back and playing at the highest level, playing all NBA, all-star level talent. But man, I remember when Paul George came back, and it took him like just an off season to get back to being like Paul George after he broke his leg. And I think that's what you're going to see here from Jason Tatum. If he does come back with like 10 games to go in the season, I don't think you can expect him after the long layoff to be all-star Jason Tatum, but just being another piece. Guys, the Boston Celtics without Jason Tatum have the second best offense in the NBA. They're this number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. It's insane what Joe Mazzulla has done with the Boston Celtics this season. And so even if he's not Jason Tatum of old, they're still going to be competing for the East Championship, which is insane to think about. So Jason Tatum, it's a great story if he comes back. I think Boston fans have to kind of temper their expectations about the caliber of player that he would be when he comes back in season without a training camp to ramp up with the team. But man, it's a great story. It looks awesome on workouts, but as we see time and time in the NBA, workouts are totally different than on-court, real 5-on-5 NBA basketball. But rest assured, the Celtics are going to be okay this season, and they have the second best offense in the NBA, number 2 seed. And there is a small chance that the Boston Celtics are going to reclaim that number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. It's just been a crazy year in the Eastern Conference, and the Celtics are right there.
You guys can follow him on social media at Tom Haberstroh. Check out the big number, obviously, and TomTheFinder.com for his title tiers. Got jokes saying tempered expectations in Boston. Tom, we appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and for the brilliance. Thank you, man.
You got it.
It's great stuff from Tom and Caroline. Like, look, I was watching last night. Jaylen Brown had the game winner. I thought it was going to be the game winner. Couldn't get it to fall, but still, the Celtics, the overachieving of the Celtics is one of the best stories so far in the NBA. It's been fun to watch this.
It's been incredible, and I've been called out by several Celtics outlets by saying, hey, you know what? The Celtics should just tank. You don't have your star marquee franchise player for the entirety of the season. No Jason Tatum. Just embrace the suck for 1 year. Try and get a lottery pick, but I've been proven wrong.
Now, let's go. We'll keep you updated on everything. We'll be back right here tomorrow, 9 a.m. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Thanks for hanging.